this week's episode, my guest and I dove headfirst into the trippy, drug-induced gameplay of Undertale. Developed and published independently by Toby Fox, Undertale was released for PC and Mac on September 15, 2015. The game focuses on a presumably young human who has fallen into an underground realm ruled by monsters. Monsters who once lived in the overworld with humans until losing the war against humanity, being banished below ground. Movement through the game's various environments is reminiscent of classic NES top-down role-playing games, while encounters with enemies are a combination of timed attacks and bullet hell-like puzzles. The story has multiple branching points and endings based on how you play the game. Chatting with me today about Undertale is the aspiring pacifist, JP Smee. Thanks for joining me this week, JP Smee, to talk about Undertale. To start off the conversation, why don't you tell me your thoughts about the sound/visuals of the game?
All right. Well, I'm a giant nerd for chiptunes, so sound was fantastic. I loved it. I love the music. Visuals, it's a barrier of entry of sorts. It felt very old school, intentionally, but ultimately I liked it. It stayed true to form throughout the whole experience.
Yeah, see, for me, sound I loved. The music was fantastic, especially towards the latter half of the game. In the beginning, it was pretty standard MIDI soundtrack-ish, very reminiscent of, classic NES role-playing games. Towards the end, I felt like, though, it kind of blossomed
Hmm.
and kind of I can still hear that song in my head of like the final fights and the final moments of the game. So the music was great. The visuals, I really wanted to hate them because they're so bad. Um, but at the same time, I almost found myself kind of being drawn in by
Hmm.
their simplicity, and it does match the game
Hmm.
very well.
Absolutely.
Um, the style works. The animations actually I thought were really good. The actual static images themselves were hit or miss, but the animations, especially in that last fight, um, and Asgore, I believe his name was, when he pushes his
Hmm.
cape back and then slams his spear through one of the actions.
Yeah, that was
That was
pretty sweet.
suitably dramatic and very well animated. So
Yeah.
visuals, you look at static shots, you look at screenshots in the game, and you go, "Damn, this is an ugly ass game." But
Hmm.
when you actually get into it, you almost the visuals are very secondary to the game, so it almost doesn't matter what it looks like.
I have more I want to say, but I'm going to save it for the end.
Okay,
So,
got it. So in terms of gameplay, um, I'm not personally the biggest fan of bullet hell sequences, and and all of the little encounters with enemies in the game function based off of bullet hell sequences. Those were for me that was the largest point of frustration I had throughout the entire game, and at times it was so frustrating it actually kind of pulled down the enjoyment factor a little bit for me because I suck so bad at bullet hell games.
I
Um,
I feel sad because for me it was the opposite. It was like a retreat. I was not expecting that at all, and I love bullet hell shooters. I'm like a giant nerd for Toho and all that stuff. So I was like,
gotcha.
yay, good times.
Well, there you go. See, if you're a fan of bullet hell games, then the gameplay will be right up your alley. I mean,
Hmm.
other than that, the gameplay itself is I don't want to say non-existent, but it's a very simplistic. Using your arrow keys on the keyboard to move and click on things kind of a game. There's really not that much to it. It's not a gameplay based game. It's more of an experience type of thing. Um, I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts on the gameplay?
Well, you can't see it right now because you're gonna see the video later. But I'm totally pointing at my controller because yeah, I use my controller on this game. You need to start doing that, sir.
I did not know that it
The
had controller support.
fail sauce. Yeah, it when you first boot up the game, there's a settings menu and you can totally
What?
map your controller. Yep. And
I
yeah,
missed that completely. I probably wasn't paying attention, but
yep,
I totally missed that. Okay.
yeah.
Wow, that might have changed
So
it. Wow, because I was
Yeah.
playing all of those bullet hell experiences with the goddamn arrow keys, and
Now,
I
I will
wanted
say
to
this.
shoot myself in the face.
There is one fight
Fuck.
in particular that I did swap over to the keyboard, actually two times, and the first was with Undyne, the one where
Right.
you had to block the incoming spears.
I could, yeah,
Because
I could see
that
that.
one
That one
that
wasn't so
one
bad.
yeah, when that one jived really nicely with the keyboard. The other one was the spider,
Mm.
where you're dodging the pet or whatever, and I felt like I could react faster using the arrow keys.
See, I almost feel like I would have done better with that one if I had a controller.
Well, see, the
Um,
problem with that was, and you probably wouldn't have noticed it as much with that one.
well, you were segmented to the
You
three
were
lines.
segmented, so
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
have to kind of keep tapping the stick, and that was
yeah,
just obnoxious. Whereas
yeah.
with the
I
keyboard,
guess I
I
could
felt
see
like I
that.
was just, kind of tapping my way around. So
God damn.
next time, sir, you
Yeah, yeah. All
gotta
right.
remember, look for the controls.
All right. So, and for those of you who don't know, I am predominantly a console gamer, so I am not used to having to go in and change my control scheme unless I'm playing a first-person shooter and I need to invert the joysticks. That's the extent of my adjustments of control schemes. So this is a very foreign concept for me, and clearly I'm having difficulty adjusting.
I
Um,
also find it amusing that I'm the diehard PC gamer, and for the first two titles we've picked,
you've gone to
I'm
controllers.
I've gone to controllers and you didn't, and
Yeah,
it's just so
it is
amusing
funny.
to me.
All right, so what did you think about the story?
Um, uh, what do I think about the story? I liked it. I think it was sufficiently approachable. There are some pretty good twists in there. They're not super hard to like not see coming,
Right.
but at the same time, there was a good payoff in the end. I really liked the characters. I think more than anything else, with the story, the writing was really good with the
Mm-hmm.
characters. I felt like every single character you encountered, and even the bad guys,
Right.
you had the opportunity to explore all of those characters and find out why they're doing what they're doing. So yeah, I did find that charming. I think is probably the best word I can think of.
All right. So, just out of curiosity, too, how did you play the game? Because you're able to, you are consciously able to choose not to fight your enemies. Was that the route that you went? Did you go true pacifist?
I did go true pacifist,
Okay.
and I did that more as a challenge for myself. Plus, I confess I did hear that the best ending or whatever is
Yeah, I
the
did too. I think if you
um,
read or are interested in games in any way, shape, or form, that was an impossible spoiler to avoid
yeah, which
around the time this game came out.
I am a little sad that that got super spoiled, but on the other hand, I don't know that I would have gone through and played the game again after getting one ending. I think I would have been fine.
Right.
But then again, the ending and the pacifist ending is really long, so
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if I might have felt differently if I had a shorter ending.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I literally did everything I possibly could to not fight things,
Right.
and I did get the so-called pacifist ending or the true pacifist ending.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I went the same exact route. Um, Partly for the same reason I did hear in advance that you wouldn't get the real ending of the game unless you played it as a true pacifist. But I think based on how the game really starts, it does encourage you to go down that route anyway. So I feel like had I not read that spoiler, that still would have been something just as a challenge to myself that I probably would have still tried to do.
I
Overall,
can
though,
see that.
for me, the story it was a little melodramatic at times.
Hmm.
It was definitely very formulaic at the beginning. It was, like you said, predictable at times. The story itself, while there were some twists and turns, some of it was a little telegraphed. But you're right. I think where this game really shines is the characters and the relationships that they have with each other, and then the relationships that you build with them.
Hmm.
Um, there were times too with some of the quirkiness and some of the just how they made the most mundane things either awkward or goofy or funny. It almost felt like watching an anime. I mean, you could definitely see that the creator Toby Fox was definitely inspired by anime, cartoons, memes, all things internet. It definitely kind of showed in the interactions and the subtle little Easter eggs you would see here and there. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that's a knock against it. If anything, it probably actually made it more entertaining, and more interesting. So so yeah, the story was good. It wasn't. I don't think it necessarily deserves the insane amount of praise that's being thrown at it, at the story itself. But it
Right.
wasn't a bad story. It was a fine story. It was a good
Hmm.
story. It just wasn't. I didn't find myself having my mind blown like I thought I was going to based on all the hype that has been building for this game.
Well, I was thinking about it, and this is going to make me sound like I'm being woe is me. I'm old, because I'm not that old, but at the same time, whatever. Uh, so in a lot of ways, though, I feel like this is the current generation of younger gamers that are really starting to kind of get into this. Um, this is kind of like for me, and this is everybody doesn't know this necessarily. I know you do, but for me, like one of my most defining games growing up, role-playing games, was Final Fantasy VI. It's like one of my
Right.
favorite games of all time, and I feel like this game is kind of becoming that for a new generation who did not grow up with Final Fantasy VI or whatever, insert,
That makes sense. I can see
game
that.
there. So that's kind of, I feel like this is the gateway game for a
Right.
lot of people into this style of game. And it helps too that it's definitely playing a lot of homages to games, and especially Final Fantasy VI. There's a really great moment in there.
Right.
But yeah, so I was thinking about that, and I think that might have something to do with the hype, because it's not what you think it is, and it's a lot deeper, than what you think it's going to be,
Right.
and it's a lot more complicated in its own way, like story-wise and character-wise, than maybe not story, but definitely character-wise, than most games still are not really that great at doing. So
Very
yeah,
true.
I think that was probably one of the reasons why it got as big as it was,
Yeah.
or
Well,
is.
speaking of kind of along those lines, we're going to go now into a little section where we talk about our biggest surprises and our disappointments with the game, if there were any. As far as surprises go, for me, there were two things that surprised me. One in just that it was surprising, and two was in how it surprised me that I actually enjoyed it and had a lot of fun with it. The first was the character Flowey. Um, it I thought from the beginning that this was simply a introductory character, or a character that was there simply to be like a little tutorial character, your standard tutorial character, basically. Um,
Hmm.
and that character ends up becoming so much more integral to the story, especially towards the end of the game. I don't want to get into spoilers, but that character is certainly more than they appear when you first start playing the game. In fact, this
Hmm.
video will have my initial gameplay moments of the game, and you'll see Flowey at the very beginning of the game. So that was one of my biggest surprises. The other one was the date with Papyrus.
Nice.
That
Yes.
was something I didn't. I said yes to the date without thinking they were actually going to have you play the actual date.
Uh-huh.
And then how that unfolded, it again, it was something where I was like, I want to hate this, but this is actually kind of charming, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
digging this. This is neat. So those were my big surprises. What about you?
Um, those were good, and I'm torn because I kind of saw the Flowey thing coming.
Hmm.
I didn't see what Flowey would become, but I saw that Flowey from the very beginning was not what you thought it was going to be. But I thought it was going to end right at the beginning.
Right, right.
And so that was definitely nice to have a big surprise with that. No, the biggest surprise for me is related to Flowey, and it is highly spoilery. So I'll just say this: the last the last several, at least in my case, because I did terrible at it. My last several encounters with Flowey, when that sequence began, and yeah, I don't want to spoil it though. That's the thing.
Well, I will say
Uh,
the visual style is basically like the most insane acid trip.
oh, that's not even what I'm getting at.
Okay,
I'm
you're not talking
getting
about
at
that part. That
no,
part
no,
was
no, no, no.
insane because Adrian,
Yeah,
my
I
wife
agree.
Adriana, was watching me play while I was playing that scene, and she literally stopped and was like, "What the hell are you playing right now?" Because the art style
Right,
shifts and it's like someone's tripping on
right.
something. It's insane.
No,
Um,
there is a sequence where the game and it's funny too because the game is very much kind of gets meta at points
oh,
during that
oh,
sequence
I know what you're talking about. Okay, yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
things start happening that are not. It's where Flowey is essentially talking to you, the player. Um, that was cool, whatever that was.
yeah. Sound
Um,
effects.
yeah, there we go. But no, the next surprise, and I'll kind of leave it at this because there are a lot of fun little things in the game, was the end boss music when the music kind of completely shifted. Because I loved the chiptunes like I mentioned, but there's definitely a song near the end of the game that it's not in chiptunes,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I was gonna mention that
kind of
earlier.
kind of completely blew my mind
Right.
because like you mentioned, it had some really good music. The themes were consistent throughout the game, but then when you got to the end and you have this real, like I hate to say like it implies chiptune isn't real, but like like legit instruments
It was
are playing
using
music.
more
Uh,
synths, more VSTs versus
yeah,
just straight MIDIs. Yeah, it
right.
was
And
really
it
really
was
nice.
like wow, this is really great. And it was still kind of keeping to the same audio cues and themes that you
Yeah,
had been kind of building upon through the entire game. So that honestly was one of the nicest surprises for me.
cool. All right, so in terms of disappointments, I almost don't want to say what my disappointment was because it's going to bring back something that was now very painful. I mentioned that the keyboard controls
Hmm.
was my biggest disappointment with the game.
Right?
Nothing about the game itself, story, gameplay, visuals, was really disappointing to me. But the fact that I thought you were forced to just use the arrow keys on your keyboard made it a very difficult experience for me. But I will eat my words there since I have since discovered I'm a fuck up. So
Nice.
yeah, JP Smee, what was your, if you had any, what was your disappointments?
Um, See, I don't have any disappointments with the game itself. I think it kind of goes to what you were commenting on, and I have largely rationalized it away. But I think that the hype for the game is maybe a bit higher than it probably deserves. Um, so I don't even know if I can fault the game for that though. I mean, that's just the
Right.
community, being what it is. Um, but no, with the game itself, I honestly have no true disappointment with it.
All right. So, all right. Overall verdicts of the game. I would say you need to play it. It's definitely worth playing. It's an experience. I think based on what you alluded to alone, that this is fourth generation of gamers going to be their eye-opening experience. That games can be more than just hack and slash, mindless forms of entertainment. They can actually be semi-deep and offer some really compelling stories, really interesting characters. Be that I wouldn't directly compare it necessarily to Final Fantasy VI, but be Final Fantasy VI like for a new generation of gamers.
Mhm.
So I would definitely say play it. You're going to be underwhelmed by the visuals, but don't get hung up on it. And definitely don't underestimate the game. It is a trippy, wild ride that is definitely worth taking. JP Smee, what are your last thoughts?
I agree with everything you said. There's one thing I was kind of holding on to. I mentioned earlier that I've been kind of wanting to bring up, and that is this game is all about misdirection and trying to see if you are willing or able to see beyond what's on the surface. Um, I mean, you could even argue that the title Undertale, it's kind of like, it's not that big of a deal.
Some
Uh,
subtext.
yeah, exactly. The visuals, again, it looks like something that's like right out of the Atari generation. The chiptune music, everything looks so simple and that first introduction with Flowey, and it's this cute little flower, and then quickly it devolves into something much different than you kind of were first thinking you were going to experience. I like that in a game. I like being surprised. I like um, kind of being presented with, situations where there are consequences for your actions, even if it's not immediately apparent what those may be. Um, this is one of the few games that I've played where there is I hate to call it a morality system, but there is a kind of a there yeah there is a morality system in this game,
Yeah.
and
You
it's
don't
one of the
notice it. You don't know it from the start, but it's there.
right, and it's one of the few that I have encountered where I feel it actually succeeded. I mean, like you look at bigger titles like BioShock, and that was touted, oh, you've got do you save the girls or do you not, the whole thing, and that was supposed to be big. And in the end, it was just very binary. Whereas with this, it felt more real. I feel like, the relationships you developed were more legitimate and the choices you took, made them more real. So it's just a good experience. It's worth it. Just don't make the mistake I did and decide that you're going to beat the game at 11 o'clock at night, because I was still playing at 1:40 this morning, which
Yeah.
is why I've got nice little circles under my eyes right now. But it was
Yeah.
good.
I would also say if you're not to finish up, if you're not a fan of bullet hell games, or you find yourself getting frustrated, don't give up. This
Yeah.
is a game that could. There were times where I was frustrated to the point of wanting to stop, and I did. I would take little breaks, but I would
hmm
come back to the game. It's definitely a game that's worth sticking with and worth finishing and seeing through to the end. Um,
And
yeah,
what,
it
real
pays
quick, I
off
want
at the
to
end.
It does. And I want to jump in on that real quick. There are many instances, and it's not immediately apparent, but there are many instances where um, failing is not necessarily a bad thing, where you can actually benefit from failing in a
Right.
sort of weird way. I don't even know how to explain that. You just kind of have to experience it for yourself. But it does not punish you. If anything, the game actually encourages you every time you die, and you will die. Like
A lot.
there are going to be entire sequences where you will be dying a lot. And that being said, every single time you die, the game is like it's okay, and that
Stay
was nice.
determined.
Yep,
Don't give up.
yep, yep. I,
All
I
right.
always feel determined.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, those are our thoughts on Undertale. JP Smee, thank you for joining me tonight to talk about the game. And thanks
Mhm.
everyone for watching. I just want to thank JP Smee again for joining me this week, and thank all of you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, be sure to join us next week as we share our impressions of Dungealot Shattered Lands. Until next time, have a great week.